Stowe, Vermont is known for its quaint village, a picturesque covered bridge, and as the ski capital of the East. The town can now add another honor, home to the 2015 Vermont Dairy Farm of the Year.
What do we got to do in the barn?
Keewaydin Farm is owned by Les and Claire Pike and their children, Dan and Susie. All four have ownership shares in the business. The Pikes farm 135 acres and milk about 90 jerseys. Keewaydin Farm is considered a small farm by Vermont standards, which suits the Pikes quite well.
Dairy farming is a really tough business and has been for a long time, but it works to stay the same size for us because we have a limited land base, and really what we've found with a lot of folks that we know that have grown and gotten bigger is that it's not a lot of fun for them anymore. Anybody that's left in dairying is doing something right, just to be farming in Vermont today, because it's a very difficult business in Vermont. It's difficult across the nation.
We do a good job because that's important to us. The quality of our milk is important to us. We're glad that the town thinks its farms are important. And we are glad that we are able to present a nice looking place to the entrance of the town, but we farm because we want to farm, and this is how we want it to be.
The Pike family has been farming beside Route 100 in Stowe since 1921. Dan Pike feels a sense of pride and responsibility when he thinks about his family's legacy.
I didn't know my great-grandfather, but my grandfather and my father grew up in this town, and they've made a real good name for us, I think, and I appreciate that, and I try to uphold that, whatever I do, as far as being in this town, and, we've been around a long time, and I think we're kind of a staple here in this town. There's a lot of people that appreciate the open lands where there isn't that much of that left anymore, so I think that is the case for us.
A key to the Pike's success over the years has been their willingness to adapt to new technology as long as it meets two criteria: be prudent and be efficient. So when Susie and Dan brought up the idea of robotic milking, Les was surprised but optimistic.
If anybody told me in 1965 we'd be milking with robots someday, I'd have laughed at them. They're crazy.
Besides the Pikes themselves, the robot milking machine is the only other worker on the farm. It's a labor-saving device for sure, but Les believes the robot has saved more than time and effort.
We thought about robotic milking for 10 or 12 years before we finally decided to actually go into that. At that point, it was a near necessity if we were going to stay in business, and we didn't really want to get back into hired labor. So this robotic thing looked very good, and we've looked at them for 12 years, but in the last 5 or 6 years, they've improved to the point where now there's a payback to robotics. If you figure the numbers right, they can pay off in 5 to 7 years. So at that point, we pulled the trigger on that, and we're still learning how to use them, but it's been a good move, I think.
Based on their milk production, they can get milked either 2, 3, or 4 times a day. They can go in as many times as they want, but if it hasn't been enough hours, then they'll just get kicked out and they won't get milked. If it's been enough hours, the machine will milk them and they'll get fed grain in the robot. To get milked probably takes an average of 6 minutes maybe. And a new heifer takes maybe anywhere from 3 days to 2 months to train going on their own.
Do you miss milking?
No, that was the worst part of farming for me. I don't miss it at all.
It's a lot less physically challenging, certainly no less mentally challenging, but a lot less physically challenging work to let the robot do the milking of the cows. It's a beautiful thing for cows, even more than people, because cows are just free to do what they want to do, whatever. It's a fabulous way to make your cows even calmer than they were before.
Since he was in college at the University of Vermont, Les has always wanted to improve one farming inefficiency in particular: what to do with what's left behind.
Cows are a fairly inefficient digester of feedstuffs, and so they make a lot of manure, and to be able to do something with that for a return is fascinating to me.
Like their decision to put in the milking machine, the Pikes look to a developing technology, methane digesters, in order to solve the challenge of manure management.
And then when a local company put on a presentation in Vermont County, they were interested in putting a digester on smaller farms. The real reason that we decided to do it, a lot of people that gave us advice to say, you know, if you can help put this technology on small farms by being a guinea pig, if you will, for the first one in the country, and therefore maybe it would be, the research would show that it can be done on a smaller farm and pay off, then it was too good an opportunity to pass up with the grant money that we had to do it with. Well, all of our manure goes through the digester now. We're not selling power because we're too small, but we net meter. So that means that whatever power that generator produces, it'll roll our meters backwards. So the bottom line is it saved us about $400 a month off our electric bills in the last calendar year. And it gives us a bedding source for the cows, which is just a recycling thing. At the end of the digestion process, it separates the manure into solids and liquid. And the solids are 100% bacteria free. They go back under the cows and it makes a great bed for the cows. The cows love it and gradually works back out of the stalls, back into the manure and back through the digester. And so it saves us $6,000 to $7,000 a year in bedding costs. And sometimes you can't even buy bedding. So that's huge financially for us, even more than the power that we save.
The Pikes' willingness to prize prudence and efficiency is the reason that their farm business is a success. It's this kind of stick-to-itiveness that all Vermont farmers are going to need to meet the challenges of the coming years.
Big challenges in 2015. With the environmental regulations that farmers are going to be under coming forward, we need to be sure that the farmers that are farming are really understanding what their obligations are, what it means to be good stewards of the land, and to implement farming practices that do a great job doing that. And I think the Pikes are a great example of that type of farm.
Kitsos oversees the Vermont Dairy Farm of the Year program.
This farm stood out with the judging committee this year, mostly because of the way they chose to find a farming style that fit the way they wanted to live. Instead of getting big, moving forward, and always being in a growth mode, they chose a breed of cows that fit the way they manage. They chose a breed of cows that fit the barn style that they have, and they chose robotic milking so that they wouldn't have to hire in outside labor and they could keep things as a reasonably manageable family unit farm. I think the best example that this farm sets is for those other farms who are in the 50, 70, 80, maybe 100 cow range, to take a look at this and say, you know what, I can do this without having to grow or get out. I can farm like this. I can utilize today's technology on such a small scale that I can manage this farm the way I want to manage it and still stay in.
Vermont farmers face increased scrutiny when it comes to environmental issues, particularly water quality. Again, the Pikes have a simple solution: waste not, want not.
You can't be inefficient and survive in farming today, especially in dairy farming. I mean, you can't waste nutrients on the ground. You can't watch them go down the river because it costs money. Every time we put nutrients on the land, whether it's manure or whether it's commercial fertilizer, if you don't go by your soil test and what you're going to remove for a crop or what you have removed and replace only that, that's sustainability. If you put on more than that, somebody's got a lot more money than I do to waste. And it's not going to get you any more crop. You put on what the crop needs.
I don't think farms are given enough credit. Any successful farmer does the best he can to try to raise healthy crops, and that means you have to do things right if you want to get the most from the land. And I don't think people realize that when you see a big open field, that's what filters the water that comes from blacktop and, you know, housing developments and store developments and all that. So open lands is one of the things that protects water quality in this state. And I think we do as much as anybody to protect water quality.
The location of Keewaydin Farm on Route 100, one of the most historic and heavily trafficked two-lane roads in the country, makes the Pikes the perfect ambassadors for agriculture.
I mean, we should have retired. We're old enough to retire, and a lot of people that are our ages and younger have retired, but we like what we do. When I walk from the barn to the house in the early morning and I see the sun, shining on the meadow or the mist coming off the meadow, I don't know, it means something here. It's something inside. I love to see the grass blowing in the wind. I like to see the trees and the green, a newborn calf. I like to see the field when they're first starting to mow and the windrows. I don't know. I don't know how to explain that. It's in here. It's a part of me, I guess.
There's advantages to being here, and the advantages to being here are that the town of Stowe likes their farmers. Stowe has quite a few farmers left compared to our neighbors to the north and south. Stowe is, I think, the only town left in the state of Vermont that has a farmer's contract that's local, so they give us a tax break on our land. The tourists and the people that are in the tourism business here like to see these fields, and they like to have the tourists that are coming into town be able to drive by these fields at 40, 45 miles an hour, because it draws them here. Just like agriculture draws people to the state of Vermont all over the state.
Efficient, innovative, and ambassadors of agriculture. That's the Pike family, the 2015 Vermont Dairy Farm of the Year. In Stowe, I'm Keith Silva with Across the Fence.